Welcome to Satsang today. And welcome if you're joining for the first time. Very glad to have you with us. And Satsang is the ever fresh and new place to come to see and recognize what is our real nature, our deepest, our truest, our permanent nature. And Satsang really is not just an event, it is ultimately our life, our ongoing deepening of seeing. So we come together formally like this and spend this time, make this commitment, this time commitment. But more importantly, our real perhaps commitment is to begin to live from what we're seeing in our everyday experience as best we can. And Satsang really is an ongoing life experience. Our whole life becomes a Satsang in the end. So one of the subjects that's come up several times this week when I've been talking to people is this idea of, whether awakening is something that is a gradual thing, or whether it's a sudden seeing, or whether there's a particular happening that really we could call awakening. And paradoxically, it is kind of both of those. There is a seeing that happens that begins to change everything. And then there is also a deepening that continues, an ever unfoldingness about what we really are, as we allow that to be translated through our mind and body and our life to be the living reflection of that truth more and more. So I really want to talk about tonight something that I've been asked several times this week, which is what really determines how long it takes from that initial seeing to whatever degree that seeing occurs, that we are not, in fact, a thing or a someone, that there really isn't a separate being when we look for it. How long does it take, and what determines that time period, the length of that time period, from when we first come to have an understanding of that, even intellectually only, mentally only, to fully living as that, to losing any ability to think of yourself and to live as a separate being anymore. And it really comes down to what I really wanted to look at was what determines that time factor. And we could say it's readiness or ripeness for awakening and all of that. It's like karma. But for me, that was never really satisfying enough. It always made me feel out of control in sort of a helpless way, not to be able to do anything about it, that I've just got to wait for that to occur. So really, it depends upon how much each one of us takes what we see, the seeing that happens, and takes that into the vehicle of a separate being and allows that egoic sense of self, our sense of being a separate being, to take what we've seen and convert it into something, make it into a journey. Some beings have this seeing that is very, very powerful. Very occasionally this happens, and there is nothing left really of the separate sense of self to take the seeing and use it to further its own cause. But for most of us, it's not like that. It wasn't for me. It really was a question of coming back to what I'd seen over and over again. So if we're sitting in satsang, or if we're in meditation, or we're just walking in nature one day, or we're having a conversation with someone, and we suddenly have a seeing that we're not really a separate being, that there really isn't a definable edge to us when we really look, or however we come to that knowing, what happens next is going to determine how long it's going to take to come to a full and final realization. So the very next thought that's suggested after we have that seeing or any epiphany in our awakening is, how am I going to live like this? How am I going to surrender? How am I going to stop my karmic patterns and come to live fully as the self, as the infinite self? And most of us accidentally, of course, slide into trying to do something with what we've seen, trying to become something. What we might have seen ourselves to be in our deepest self-inquiry can be very, very different from what we expected. And it would be extraordinarily different to how we've been living as a separate being. So it feels very strange and new and different. And really, where we seem to be when we have that seeing seems very, very far away from that truth. We may be experiencing lots of suffering. We may be experiencing lots of lack and limitation in our life. So it seems like we have to do something to get to that awakened place that we have seen. Or even if we haven't seen it, we may still feel that we have to do something or become something. And while that is true for our separate sense of self, our egoic sense of self, which is trying to do something and become something, it really isn't true for what you already are. There isn't anything you can do or become or let go of that's going to make you more the infinite self that is the source of all of this universe than you already are. So if we can keep our focus then as much as possible on seeing and seeing and seeing what we are, seeing it again and again and again, and noticing this tendency that we all have to kind of want to do something with what we've seen, to compare ourselves with what we've seen, our current situation, our current, how we are living in our awakening in our life. And not set off on a journey, not set off to try to, I've had this seeing and it was very, very different to how I am right now. And I need to do something or become something or let go of something. Usually those are the three things that we do. We allow our egoic sense of self to take what we've seen and package it into a journey that's going to get me from where I think I am to what I have seen myself to be. And there is no way to make that happen. If we set off on a journey to try to become or step into or let go of whatever we feel we need to let go of before we can be that self consciously, that infinite, all-pervading essence, then it's a never-ending journey. It's a never-ending travel, a story, fiction that's going to leave us even more frustrated. I'm sure you have a sense of what I'm talking about, or I did that for a very long time myself. But no matter how different it seems when we have a seeing to how we're living right now, if instead we can ask, okay, how can I come to stop thinking like a separate being, stop traveling like a separate being now? That the seeing of what I am is going to eventually override my living as what I am not, this separate being. Then that time between our first seeing and our full and stable awakening is going to be massively reduced. So what do you do when you've had a seeing? Can you notice that thing inside you that wants to do something with it? Okay, how do I apply this now? What do I do with this now? How do I take what I've seen and apply it to my life and move somehow closer to the infinite self? How do I take what has been revealed to me and make it work in my life? And this very act of trying to do something with what we've seen just kind of serves to emphasize that we're separate to that self that we're trying to, the infinite self that we're trying to recognize. So the fastest way and the simplest way to wake up fully that I discovered myself was to keep seeing, to keep seeing. If we are that which is watching, that is just aware, how far are we going to get by trying to do something with what we've seen or trying to become something? Is that pure awareness, the infinite self, is it doing anything? Does it really have any interest in what thoughts are going on in our mind? And does it really have any interest in where we think we are in our awakening? How far we feel we have to go? And if we can begin to sort of look like this, then it really will make this whole awakening a much simpler and easier thing. As human beings, we've thought for a very long time that we are someone moving through time, moving through life, moving towards something and perhaps away from something else. So we move from childhood into adolescence and then into adulthood, and eventually our body moves into old age, and the whole progression of that, the moving and becoming and the changing of the body and the mind and our life, it works for that, but it doesn't work for our clear recognition of the self. So can you take what is revealed? Can you see whatever you see when you self-inquire, when you meditate, whatever is shown, seen, revealed, and simply ask to see it again, and to see it again, and to see it deeper and clearer, so that we're living as the seeing itself, as that which is watching. We're not making what we see into a project that we're going to set about conquering, so that our awakening doesn't become a journey to travel somewhere. If we already are the infinite self, already totally that, we've just thought that we were something else, someone else. We thought that we split off from the infinite self and became this separate being. But that was never really true. Then what do we need to do to get back to that? Is there any back to achieve? If we never really arose out of the self, emerged out of the self, if we never really fell from grace, or whatever term we want to use, is there anything we can do or become that's going to change that? Is there anything even to undo or do? Or is it coming back to seeing again and again what we already are, just the seeing? The seeing perhaps is going to be more important than anything else. So we can begin to reorient ourselves in our awakening. If what I'm saying is resonating with you, for me, it really brought about this reorientation of how I was coming to my awakening. That any problem I seemed to have in my life or in my awakening or anything was really a reflection that there was just a deeper seeing that needed to happen, a clearer seeing, to have something else revealed. That there was still some part of my being that was thinking as a separate being, believing in time, progress, process, evolution, change, that somehow was going to change into becoming, or change into the self, or become the self, something like that. So it's a much simpler way to just want to see, to just want to see, and to keep wanting to see no matter what's revealed. And to notice the tendency to want to do something with what you see, to use it for some self-improvement project, which is really what the egoic sense of self is, how can I take what I've seen and make it work for me? How can I take what I've seen and use it to make me more awakened or more peaceful? Those seem like noble and lofty goals of the egoic sense of self, but they really won't lead you anywhere. If you are standing in front of a mirror with your eyes closed and you want to see yourself in that mirror, there is nothing you can do to make that seeing happen. You just have to open your eyes and look, and then look again and look again, until you've lost somehow this tendency to imagine yourself to be anything other than you're seeing in this mirror. The mirror in this analogy is self-inquiry or meditation. So if this is really kind of hitting home somewhere inside, it probably will produce this kind of relaxation, that there isn't anything you can do, or the doing is the seeing, the attention going to wanting to see, being curious. What is the self? What does it mean to be the self already? What does that mean for my awakening? What does that mean for my karma? What does that mean for my life, my my relationships, my finances, my career? What does it mean for my meditation? Why am I meditating even? Am I meditating to try to become something? Or to let go of something? Or am I sitting to see clearer, just to see clearer? And it will change your whole reason for coming to satsang even. The recognition that I must already be the infinite self that is the source of all of this, because there cannot be anything other than something that is infinite. No matter how far away I feel from that right now, or what's going wrong in my life, I must already be what I'm trying to become. And that there is no process or journey that can deepen that just is seeing, just to want to see, and a recognition of what it means to be infinite, what it means to be formless, what it means to be the self. Allowing that to saturate your being, allowing that to replace all these other tendencies to want to become, to want to travel, to want to journey further. So do you have any further to go? Or are you already that self and coming to see it clearer every day? There's a huge difference in those experiences, isn't there? One is trying to get somewhere that you can never arrive at, because your very traveling is emphasizing that you're not already there. And the other is this kind of recognition that I'm already that, to whatever degree I've seen it, and it's going to keep getting clearer and clearer for the rest of this bodily existence. So are you here to see or to do? Are you here to deepen and clarify your seeing? Or are you coming to satsang to try to become something that you don't feel you already are? It's just to kind of allow this to change your motivation and your orientation to why you're here in satsang. If it's an effortless unfolding of deeper and deeper seeing, you're going to have a lot more fun. You're going to be a lot more relaxed. And you're going to find that those seeings happen much more easily, and they'll be much more powerful. And it'll be happening spontaneously, that you're starting to live from those, that there's nothing you need to do to make that happen. It's just beginning to the effect of seeing it is beginning to already apply it within your life. It's not something you have to make happen. We may only have to do some seeing, and so where we find it challenging to apply it, that's all. So it's just a switching over to a different reason for coming to satsang, a different reason for coming to awakening in general. Let me start from the recognition that I must already be where I'm trying to get to. Let me start from the seeing, the knowing that I must already be what I am trying to become. I must already be looking from the place that I've been trying to reach. And just that change in where you're starting from is going to change your entire perspective. Because if you already are that, you can't fail to see. It's just a deepening of seeing. And it doesn't matter. There's no question then of worthiness or unworthiness. There's no question of readiness or ripeness. That is just something that develops along the way. You're already ready because you are that. And you don't need to be worthy of this because you are never unworthy. You're already the stable, grounded, awakened state, confused about itself only in thoughts. We come to think of ourselves as a separate being. So can we relax a bit more in our practice, in our meditation, in our inquiry? There is nothing that can stop you as the infinite self from seeing yourself. You cannot fail to recognize what you already are when you want to see, because you are the seeing itself. You are that which is seeing from everywhere at all times. You're not a limited separate being, nor have you ever been. If you were a limited being, then there could be something that could stop you, something else outside of you that could block you from having what you want, this full seeing. But if you are the source and the power and the intelligence behind the entire cosmos, what can stop you from recognizing yourself when you really, really want to? It can only be that we can imagine that we can be stopped, or we can imagine and therefore experience that we can be delayed in our seeing, that something can block us, or that we're not good enough, or some other such thing that we keep experiencing. If you already are that and have always been, how long is it going to take to see it? What can stop the infinite power that you are, that creates universes, galaxies, stars, planets, black holes? It creates all of this. What can stop you from seeing? When you apply that same power and intention to see what you are, what can get in the way of that? Can anything? We just need to stop thinking so much like a separate, limited being. I really want to see what I am, but I might not achieve it. It might not happen for me. I might not be ready enough. I might not be good enough for it. Can we just throw all that away? It should be washed away in this recognition, even if it's only here at first, that I am already where I'm trying to get to. And it's just a seeing of that clearer and clearer and clearer. So I hope that helps you to see that it is absolutely going to happen for you. In fact, it's already occurring. There is no if it happens in the self. There is no maybe I'll awaken. There is no maybe I will or maybe I won't, to the infinite self. When it wants to see itself clearly, it absolutely will. When it stops allowing these old thought patterns of a separate being, this old way of thinking, to diminish this pure desire for it to recognize itself. So what reasons are you using to delay this full recognition, and can you let go of those? Do they apply to you that is the source of all of this? There is never any time when the self fails to recognize itself. There is never any time that anyone wants to see what they are clearly and fails to do so, although we may experience long delays as we allow our thoughts to be experienced. The thought that we can be delayed or that we can fail, all of that, we'll experience it again and again. That it's a possibility awakening we'll feel as a separate being, not a certainty as the self sees it. Okay, so I have one question here that has been emailed in, but if you'd like to share something or ask a question, I'll read this one first. But if you want to ask a question, feel free to raise your hand on Zoom, and I'll come to you as soon as I can. So we'll start with this first one. It says, "Hi Helen, thank you so much for your love and time given to answering questions for us all. I just have a little confusion about thought that I'd love for you to shed some light on. In your last satsang, you said that thought eventually recognizes its source. But does thought have the ability or capacity to recognize anything? I thought that thought is just an inert appearance that consciousness perceives, just like Siri giving us directions. Siri doesn't actually realize where we are going, and she never will. She just spews out data. I thought this was the same with thought, and that it is only pristine, empty consciousness that perceives thought, or energizes, or gives thought its apparent life and meaning. So would it be correct to say that awakening is the realization that thought is inert, and the only the only reality or truth it has is to the extent which consciousness enlivens it may be, and all that is actually alive is emptiness or the unmanifest, not manifestation, including thought? It feels here that awakening is conscious realization that there is only nothing, pure eternal light, shining onto thought and creating apparent realities, all from thought. But that nothing ever actually happens because only emptiness is the alive aspect or real aspect. Thank you again so much for all of your wonderful sharing. Lots of love. So yeah, it's, those words, thought realizes its source. Those are really just to emphasize that nothing is actually occurring to that emptiness, as you've called it here. As you said, nothing is ever happening to it. And in fact, nothing is ever happening at all. That really the aliveness, the intelligence, the sentience is the pure formlessness. And it's making all of these different shapes in manifestation. It hasn't actually become those things. So one of the shapes it makes is human thought, and all of these gross, tangible objects as well, everything in between, thoughts, emotions, a table, a house, a planet, all of it a human body. It isn't really a human body, it's that no thingness that is condensed to look like, it begins to vibrate and look like something, and we give it a label. So you're absolutely correct that thought isn't sentient in itself. It's apparent sentience, intelligence, is borrowed from the formlessness. Just like if you were to take some Play-Doh and make it into some different shapes, the shapes themselves are inert, powerless, aren't they? It's still just Play-Doh, or we could use the clay analogy, or the wave on the ocean. It isn't really able to exist by itself. The wave, it's part and parcel of the ocean. And they really, ultimately, there never was anything happened. Something seems to arise out of the ocean, but it's not separate to, and it's still water, isn't it? It's still the exact same substance as the ocean itself. So thought isn't intelligent at all. Mind isn't intelligent at all, but it seems to be, it seems to have this realization. At some point, a thought arises in our mind, now I see what I am. Whereas before, previously, the thought arose, I'm a separate being. I am this body. That was the dominant thought at those times. So let me just double check I've answered this. Yeah, it's just the way I was using the words, really, to try to emphasize that only thought is on a journey, not the actual self. The self is already, as you pointed to here, pristine and perfect. It's not trying to get anywhere, is it? It's not even trying to wake itself up, paradoxically. That only becomes necessary, or a desire, once thought arises. Once it takes the shape, the self takes the shape of a human being, it's got the capacity to discern, to compare, to think, to evaluate, and it begins to pay attention to all the moving and changing, and it begins to identify, wants to know about itself, it wants to experience itself. And the very first thing it does, it experiences the body, begins to identify as that. But the body is the self, thought is the self too. So nothing has really occurred when you look at it from that perspective. I should think that's what you're pointing to here. Thought is very much like Siri. It's just giving you a pre-programmed set of answers based on the available stuff that's in there. So I hope that helps to answer that. And awakening is that you've said. Would it be correct to say that awakening is the realization that thought is inert and the only reality or truth is to the extent which consciousness enlivens? So that's one level, if you will, one seeing and awakening. And then after that will come the realization that thought is also, that there isn't really any such thing as thought. It is pure, empty, substanceless formlessness, looking like a thought. That's where it kind of gets paradoxical. Okay. So if anyone would like to ask a question or to share anything, feel free to raise your hand and we'll see what's on your mind. If you're having any challenges, okay, more breakthroughs. Steve?
Hello, Helen.
Hey, how you doing?
It's bad. You just said something there that it's something like when the noumenon gets tired of having these thoughts, blah, he'll stop doing it.
Yeah.
And it sort of lifted a weight off me. I thought it's not to do with me at all. Then, you know, the confusion. What the hell am I doing here? Then, you know.
The self, it may recognize itself. It may have a seeing. Oh, I'm not a thing. I'm not a someone. The very first time that we see that, to whatever degree, it's going to have some impact. But usually what happens afterwards is that it goes back to thinking about itself as a separate being to some degree. And it starts to imagine that it's got to somehow make something happen to see that again, to be that self. So it goes back into thinking about itself in terms of time and change and becomingness. And that seems to make this journey that goes on forever, that we never arrive. It begins then. Eventually, it starts to get interested. The self starts to get really interested in, sees that journey isn't getting anywhere, starts to really, what is it like to be that timelessness right now? What is it like to be that infinitely powerful self right now? What is it like to already be beyond limitations and becomingness and karma and all of that? And it will just suddenly for me, there was this urgency about really finding out about what that means. Is there any journey left for me? Why can't I live like this right now? Sort of a real urgency in that. Something was suddenly very important.
Is that bypassing the mind type of thing? That's happening and the mind comes in as, it's like two things going on here. I'm mixing it up.
It's more like a switch over, isn't it? From a dominant way of functioning is less and less trying to get somewhere and more wanting to see where we already are. Less and less are we believing this sense that there's somewhere to get to. And it becomes more and more interesting to perceive that we are already where we're trying to get to. So the kind of a letting go of all these reasons why we can't just be what we want to be right now. What can stop you right now from living however you want to live? And if you try to answer that question, why can't I be the self right now consciously? The only reasons we can come up with are, if we really sort of dig down deep inside, to do with time and, becoming, or I haven't seen enough yet, or I've got further to go, or I've got something to let go of first. All of those are the self playing with process and progress and time still a little bit. Don't try to figure it out. Don't try to figure it out. It'll just confuse. But if you are already the infinite self, what else is there left for you to do?
Nothing. And if you'd asked me last week, I'd have been thumbs up. Yeah, I understand. And then this last couple of days, the fears woke up this morning full of fear again. I thought, here we go. But I think what you're saying, I'm not doing. There's nothing going wrong here. It's the nomenon that's mixed up, not necessarily me. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
When that fear arises, is it taken into the becomingness of ego, or is it just fear? Is it something you've got to fix and get rid of and transcend and all of that, or is it just fear? Is it just a shape that you're taking as the self, as the noumenon? You see the difference?
I do, yeah.
My experience is I'm just here and I'm looking at all these different shapes I can appear as. I'm not changed by any of them, but they come and go. And some of them are what the mind would call pleasant, some are not so pleasant, like fear. But here's just another, I can take the shape of fear, or I can take the shape of confusion, or I can take the shape of bliss, or I can take the shape of a house or a human body, and it's from the self, that's kind of what it looks like. From the ego, oh God, this fear, why is this happening? What do I need to do about it? And it sets about a whole to-do list then, doesn't it? It gets its notebook and pen out and says, more work needed, obviously,
Just put it down, yeah.
Does that help?
sometimes it seems very, very clear. I feel like I'm expanding things a bit, get really optimistic, and then somehow.
Why can't you be the Buddha right now? Why can't you?
Why can't?
And it's not necessarily a question you have to answer verbally, but suddenly that question became extraordinarily important to me. It was like oxygen. Am I going to keep believing in limitations, and how long for? And something was just getting very, very tired of that inside.
I'm getting tired of it. Like you said, I've been looking at the separation, and I've really been working on that stuff. And in my mind,
it
seems to be getting easier, and I can see a bit wider, a bit more.
The process is going to continue. Your mind is going to keep having epiphanies and getting clearer and clearer and clearer. Right. Is that going to change the self? Or is it as it always was and will be already right now? I'm not saying those epiphanies are bad or wrong. They're enjoyable, they're good. But could they just be happening in front of you like the fear? And you're just here. You're just here already.
Yeah, I could sort of clearly saw that then. But then somehow when things start to open up, I sort of get involved in that.
The self wants to go play with the time and the evolution again for a little while, doesn't it? But it comes back quicker each time. It picks up the sense again of, I'm getting there now. I've really seen something deep and clearer here. I'm really getting there, or I'm not getting there. I've just, something's going wrong, or those two opposite experiences. I would just kind of ponder that, why can't you be that already right now? What does it matter what shapes you're making, what forms you're taking? Does the presence of fear mean that you're not that? Suddenly, you're suddenly not the self? Or is it just a frequency that you're arising as, like a wave in the ocean?
But like you say, it's an unpleasant feeling, or a wave, or whatever you want.
Is it to the self? Is it unpleasant to the self?
No, I suppose not.
Does it have good and bad and wanted and not wanted in that way?
No.
Lovely.
You.
Totally clear now, aren't you? More confused than before you put your hand up. Yeah.
Just apologise for rushing about. You saw me moving because, but I spilled a cup of coffee in my lap.
Oops.
So go off. It wasn't mad hot at the time actually, but good. I did have to move fast. But thanks a lot for you.
Good to talk to you. Take care.
Yeah. Bye.
Kelly, when you're ready.
Hi, Helen.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. Okay, I'm the Buddha, and I want to see more, and it would be nice to see more. And you said you got to a point where you just really wanted to see, what did that look like, or taste like, or there seems, I don't know. It seems well, what I'm seeing is not all of it right now. It seems that way.
Or are you the Buddha appearing as a partially awakened human being?
Yeah, of course.
And there's a difference there, isn't there? You can take the shape, you can look like a half awakened, or I'm not saying you're half awake, you're very much there, but the point I'm trying to make is there ever going to be a point where you feel you've seen it all? Or is that part of the time and the becomingness? There's an absoluteness about being the Buddha now. I absolutely am this totally, whatever this is. And this may look like a completely asleep human being, or a completely awakened human being, or somewhere in the middle of those two. You're absolutely being that in that moment, aren't you? Completely.
Is there such a thing?
Such a thing as well. Sorry.
As absolutely knowing you're the Buddha?
There isn't really any. Absolute knowingness is showing up as relative knowingness, you could say. It's taking the shape of relative knowing, relative knowledge, becomingness. Just if you start with water, you could boil it and make it into water vapor and it would be invisible, or you could cool it down and make it into ice. Those two things look very different, feel different, but it's still the same H2O molecules, isn't it? So the same Buddha nature that is already perfect and complete can form itself to look like a rock, or a very awakened human being, or a human being that's confused about what it really is. But it's still the same absoluteness appearing as that.
Is there a sense of knowing that absoluteness?
There is a knowing that deepens that you are absolutely already that, no matter how it's looking.
Yes.
So even if we, the first day after that body was born, you didn't have any idea about what you were, or that you're a separate being, or you're not a separate being, and you are absolutely the self still. 10
Yes.
years from now, if we looked at you, you'd look more awakened, sound more awakened, but you're still exactly the same self. Even before the body arose, when the body eventually goes, the same infinite self. Just the shapes, it's like the wave starts to arise and gets bigger and bigger and bigger and then eventually recedes. But nothing is happening to the ocean, is it? It's always just the water in that.
Right.
Something happened there, right? Something.
Well, I'm just wondering if, in some ways, it's like none of my business.
Just explain
know
what
what
you
I'm
mean by
saying?
that. I don't know.
It's like, okay, when am I going to get this? When am I going to know what I am? When am I going to see that I'm everything? Everything's me. It's like, who's asking? Okay, well, whoever is asking, just say it's none of my business. None of your business. It's going to happen when it happens, because I'm not. I am asking you if there's a better, is there a way, another way to find
Is
absolute
it,
certainty. But if there isn't, then maybe it's just none of my business. That's what I mean.
or maybe it isn't even your question. Maybe you are already that which is effortlessly perfect and still and complete. Maybe it's not even you that really wants to know, wants
Yeah.
to see. Ironically, when you really get that, the
Yes.
mind has the epiphany. It comes and
Yes.
yeah.
It's the mind that wants to know.
And if you can relax, knowing that even that seeing, even that recognition, now I see, now I know, is not going to change you. If you relax into that more and more, I am as I always was and always will be the same, then that epiphany tends to happen very quickly in the mind. The recognition that I could never have been anything other than this, and the knowing that we're looking for happens anyway. Because we're not picking this, even this greatest desire for liberation isn't anything to do with us actually, in our purest. It comes from this idea that something happened to us, something changed, that we were this separate being. that got lost and stuck, and now we want to get back home, find what we really are, see what we really are. But awareness, silence, stillness, consciousness, whatever we're calling it, it doesn't actually even really care about that. It just, it has no capacity to want to recognize itself in just the unmanifest aspect of it. Is it going to make you any more peaceful than you can be right now to have this epiphany in your mind? Not so much. But that's not the popular thinking, is it? That's the I won't be peaceful until I've had this seeing, we usually say. Mine says, yeah, but hang on a minute, you know.
I think there's a habit of searching.
Yeah.
Even if it's not just for that.
That's all it knows, isn't it? Just moving towards something. Never content with where I am, just moving towards something.
And even if there is contentment, it doesn't feel that entirely natural all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, maybe I should look at a new place to live or something. Maybe I should travel, whatever. But it.
So is there some part of you that's already total and complete?
Yes.
And can you be that more, spend more of the time noticing that, being that, and relaxing into letting go of this journey more and more, this trying to get somewhere, or trying to have some epiphany happen, like we were saying. Because then you're home already. You haven't arrived home, but you are home, in which that epiphany is going to take place, whenever it does. It's just a different way to kind of orient yourself, isn't it, to it?
Yes.
However much I've seen what I really am, let me be that, let me pay attention to that. Let me spend as much time as I can spare noticing it, wanting to get to know it more. And if that can be enough for me in that moment, I don't necessarily have to understand anything about it right now. Then there's a kind of a relaxation and openness, and epiphany start to come very, very quickly then.
So let what I understand be enough.
Yeah. Right now, you can be happy and complete with what you've seen, can't you?
Yeah.
Can you just spend more time like that? And in that openness, the seeings that we want will come anyway. It's backwards to how mine says, isn't it? Mine says, yeah, but if I don't try to see, how am I going to see? If I don't make some effort to.
Yeah, or if I do something else. If I do something else, like like spend a lot of time in nature or in the garden or something, it feels almost like I'm not attending to the self.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know that's not true too.
Yeah, your body and mind might feel better when you're in nature, but has it changed the self really that you are?
No.
It's a nicer experience, but not actually.
Right.
Yeah. And that just becomes clearer and clearer. Like I've always completing what I've seen already. I can just rest in that, however much I've seen already. And if that's enough for me in this moment, then that's gonna deepen anyway in that.
Okay. I see the thought that comes up sometimes comparing.
Comparing, did you say?
Yeah. That'd be a good time to remind myself.
But really the essence of the awakened state is being right where you are right now, isn't it? Being that fully. as much as you can. Being authentic to whatever you are experiencing right now in this moment. Mind says, okay, well, that's not as awakened as somebody else, but that is, hopefully you can see clearer and clearer that that's just creating a sense of distance between you and where you want to be. That very thought, isn't it, when it's believed,
Yes.
emphasizes not being there yet, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wonderful. Does that help?
Yes.
Yes and no. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Something
well,
inside gets it, right? It's we may not sort of get it up here, but it's something is shifting inside, just relaxing into it more.
Okay.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Lovely. Good to talk to you.
You too.
Maria, when you're ready. Excuse me. Hi, how
Hi,
you
Helen.
doing? How you doing?
Good, thank you. Thank you. Helen, so in everyday life, so say if someone in my staff promises to do something and they don't do it, and I find myself getting upset. And right there, you said being authentic to whatever you're experiencing at the moment. So, okay, I find myself feeling upset, and that might be a feeling, sometimes it's mixed. It might be a feeling of anger, and then sometimes there's like mixed in feelings of fear and maybe a little sadness as well. And so I guess my question is about when you say authentic, and I know that for myself, I have numbed my feelings for, I don't know, my whole life.
We all do,
and I'm
right?
Just,
we all do.
Yeah. So I'm just recently discovering the power of feeling, and maybe feeling raw, pure feeling, and so being authentic to whatever you're experiencing. I'm not sure what is it I'm experiencing when I'm numb and when I haven't really learned how to feel. So what is the role of feeling and maybe trauma and the whole emotional body in awakening? Because just this sense of knowing that, I mean, there's a part of me that says, I know this upset can only happen because there's a separate self, or the thought comes up, that's a separate self feeling it. You know, so I divide myself, like awareness would not be upset. And I'm thinking, oh, maybe the ego is saying that actually, or the separate self is actually saying that. If you could help me bring some clarity to that. Thank you.
Anytime that we're feeling anything negative, it's because we're being inauthentic to some degree to what we really are, absolutely, as in the infinite self. And it's showing us where we have some thought, as you said, that is no longer true for us and has never been true. So if you're interacting with another being and they're treating you in a way that are not doing something they said they were going to do, for example, it's going against a desire that you have to be respected, perhaps, or to for people to be to honor their commitments, or whatever it is that we're desiring. And whatever a negative emotion comes with that is going to show us really what the thought is that we're believing. So anger is going to show us that we feel we can't get what we want. It's kind of got this root feeling of being blocked, this sense of being blocked. Sadness, it is really a sense of a thought underneath sadness that says that there's really no point in kind of trying even. It's kind of lost something that I need to be happy. And each negative emotion has an idea underneath it, a story behind it. So you can be authentic to the emotion when it comes up. We can allow the emotion completely, not pushing it away, recognizing that it's coming from that separate self, as you said, And at the same time, not believing it. That's the fullness of. I can allow something to arise. I can allow it to show me what I'm thought that I haven't examined yet. That some thought, some idea I'm believing is no longer true for me. It was true as a separate being. So let's take anger for example in this. I think you mentioned anger, right? If I want everyone in my office or my workplace to function efficiently, for us all to get along, whatever it is that we're wanting, and it's not happening, it's going to bring up this sense of anger or frustration or irritation, all of which are forms of anger. And it's going to, we can be authentic to the emotion. Well, it's the first step, isn't it? Allowing ourselves to feel it, as you said. Even this numbness that you mentioned, it's kind of an emotion in itself, isn't it? It's a kind of pain response, if you will. And then looking at the core idea behind that emotion, what is it trying to tell me that I still believe? Some sense that I just can't get things to go the way I want. I can't get what I want. Something's blocking me, if we're talking about anger. Something is getting in the way of what I want. And is that true for the self? It's true for a separate being, the egoic sense of self, but is it true for the self? What can block it? So authenticity is, it's it's many things, but really in this situation, it's allowing the emotion, but also not believing and buying the story. Because if you buy that story that you can't get what you want, it's just going to spiral further, isn't it, in that? Can you get a sense of it?
So there are sensations that come up.
Mhm.
So I know that I've done some work with possibility management, and in these trainings they talk about the difference between feelings and emotions, and feelings is just something that arises very raw and pure, and it doesn't last long. It has no story attached to it, and that feelings is almost like an energy that we could actually use for, I don't know, setting boundaries or
Mhm.
sadness becoming as a way to connect to others. Fear is a way to go over our barriers and so forth. But
Yeah.
I gather that's still at a very separate self level that we're talking about. But it's like, how do we navigate in this relative world before we can fully live from a place of the knowing of our true self?
It's really honoring every way that you're showing up in this moment, that you're showing up in this moment as the formless self, and you're also showing up as a human being, feeling whatever you're feeling, that you are the self appearing as a human being and living that daily experience, whatever we're experiencing. So can we allow the fullness of our human expression, our human experience, whilst also watching that? We allow that to, it's not denying any aspect of your experience at all. Usually we're in denial of some part of it. When I think I'm a separate being, I'll be completely in denial of my formlessness. I might not even know it exists. And then when I start to recognize my formlessness, most of us go into denial of our humanity, our human experience.
Mm-hmm.
In a fully awakened kind of way, it is allowing, I'm going to use the word both, but they're not really both, but can I be absolutely peaceful, recognizing what I am, and also irritated with this person that won't give me the paperwork I need or something like that? Does it have to be one or the other in that?
Hmm. And what would then be, say, the role of trauma work, so that as a human being, if in childhood certain things happen and we adopt a survival strategy that then subconsciously or unconsciously shows up in our lives repeatedly, I don't know whether that's what you call karmic patterns that triggers us or brings up reactivity. Can you speak more about that?
We all have ideas that we weren't even aware we had, that we've begun to experience from perhaps a very, very early age, that we've brought from the last supposed separate lifetime. For me, they were very much, I can't get what I want and I'm not safe, was a
Yes.
pivotal thing my entire existence as a separate being. And we've all experienced those ideas over and over again and had them really, really seem true. Therefore, we hold on to them because we think, I don't feel safe. I'm a separate being living in this world and there's all these things I can't control. It really seems to make sense to hold on to that idea. I'm not safe. I need to protect myself. But if you can come to see that we've never been that separate being, we've always been the infinite self, and that it never really was true that we were unsafe, although we absolutely experienced it like that because of the power of the self to dream, to imagine itself to be just a someone somewhere. That anything the self believes as a human being it's going to experience is extraordinarily real. Usually that we're not safe, it'll manifest in some way. The very essence of being a separate being is fear, absolutely, in that. So there's going to be a sense of looking at these ideas that we've really, really believed. We've really just never once questioned, the sense that I can be hurt by someone else, or I'm not safe, or I might not get what I need to be safe, or what I want to feel safe. We'll be called to really question these ideas at some point. And the ones that we've really believed tend to come with a lot of emotion because we've experienced them over and over again as if true. You get a sense of it. Some of the ones that we just don't question because right from our earliest memory, it's been that way. That's all we can remember. We can't even imagine life being otherwise, perhaps, when we first start that work. There's a process of allowing this emotion to come to the surface, letting go of this numbness, this self-protective thing of not feeling what we're feeling, allowing that to come, to feel it, and then to question what the idea is behind it. Is it true that I'm not safe, that I'm in danger? Is it true I can't get what I want? Those kind of questions are helpful to kind of begin to undo that. It's very traumatic. Just being a separate being is traumatic because it comes with fear inbuilt into it.
So I have heard that at some point in our childhood, there's a moment when we actually made a decision, even though we don't remember, that I am not safe. Perhaps something happened. And there's the sense that maybe going back to that point in childhood at the moment where that decision was made and feel the full emotions of that moment will assist us, I guess, in really feeling it and recognizing, and I guess feeling compassionate towards oneself of why in that moment that decision was made and perhaps no longer necessary for our survival.
Yeah. It's we have experienced these ideas as completely true, completely true. And we acted from that place where they were true, where we felt they were true. And we've gone into lots of self-protective mechanisms, layers upon layers of protecting ourselves from imagined other beings that aren't really there in that way, although we've absolutely experienced it like that. And the recognition of ultimately seeing that none of that was ever true, but the compassion arises that it felt and was experienced as true for many, many lifetimes. And that there are beings around me all everywhere that are still experiencing it as true, because it's the infinite self dreaming. So the dream is going to feel real because it's given the reality that the self has, you know. There's a lot of compassion arises for yourself and then for everyone else, that everyone is experiencing their thoughts about reality, and most of those thoughts are terrorizing us and scaring us completely. So there's a understanding of that that develops. Does that help you? Good, lovely. Good to talk to you. Thank you.
To talk to you.
Okay, so we'll leave it there for today. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for your intelligent, wonderful questions and sharings. Namaste.